If you have few or no friends, you likely have these 7 rare traits. Introduction. There is something that nobody tells you when you are sitting alone on a Friday night, scrolling through images of other people's gatherings, other people's laughter, other people's seemingly effortless circles of belonging. Nobody tells you that your solitude might not be a deficiency. Nobody tells you that the very qualities that make deep friendship difficult to find might be the same qualities that make you rare. Instead, the world offers you a quiet, persistent message that to have few friends is to have failed at something fundamental. That popularity is a measure of worth. That the person with the full social calendar is somehow more complete than the person who sits alone with their thoughts and finds, to their own surprise, that they do not entirely mind. This video is not a consolation prize. It is not a gentle pat on the back designed to make you feel better about something that is actually a problem. It is something more honest than that, an examination of what the research, the philosophy, and the quiet testimony of countless deeply solitary people actually reveals about the connection between a certain kind of inner life and a certain kind of social experience. Because the truth, when you look at it clearly, is striking. The people who struggle most to form and maintain large social circles are very often the people who are operating at a depth that most casual friendships simply cannot accommodate. So before you conclude that something is wrong with you, consider the possibility that something is simply different about you. Consider the following 7 traits, and see how many feel uncomfortably, recognizably true. You think too deeply for small talk to satisfy you. The first and perhaps most immediately recognizable trait is this: you find small talk genuinely, almost physically painful. Not mildly boring, painful. There is something in you that recoils from conversations about the weather, about television, about what someone had for lunch, about the slow and meaningless cataloging of surface-level events. You do not find these exchanges relaxing or socially lubricating. You find them exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to people who don't share the feeling, because for them, small talk is easy. It costs nothing. It is the social equivalent of breathing. For you, it costs something significant. It costs the energy of performing interest you do not feel. It costs the quiet internal frustration of knowing that the conversation is skating endlessly across the surface of things while the depths, the actually interesting depths, remain completely untouched. You want to talk about what people are afraid of. You want to talk about what they actually believe, not what they say they believe. You want to talk about the strange experience of being alive, about time, about meaning, about the things that keep people awake at 3 in the morning. And most casual social settings are not built for that. This creates a problem. Because small talk is the gateway drug of human connection. Most friendships begin there, in the shallow end, and only gradually wade deeper. If you cannot tolerate the shallow end long enough to find the people worth wading deeper with, you will find yourself perpetually standing at the edge of the pool, watching others splash around and wondering why you cannot simply join in. The answer is not that you are antisocial. It is that you are depth-seeking in a world that has normalized the surface. You have an unusually low tolerance for inauthenticity. The second trait follows naturally from the first, but it cuts a little deeper. You are not just bored by small talk. You are genuinely unsettled by inauthenticity. You can sense it the way some people can sense a change in the weather before it arrives. When someone is performing rather than being, when someone is saying what they think you want to hear rather than what they actually think, when the smile is slightly too wide or the enthusiasm is slightly too loud, you notice. You always notice. This is not a superpower that brings you joy. It is frequently a source of loneliness. Because a significant portion of everyday social interaction is, by its nature, performative. People present curated versions of themselves. They smooth over their doubts and insecurities and strange thoughts and present something more palatable, more socially acceptable, more easily digested. And most people engage with these presentations without distress. They offer their own performance in return, and the whole thing hums along pleasantly enough. But you cannot fully participate in this exchange. Not because you are morally superior, but because something in you resists it at a deep, almost involuntary level. You find yourself going quiet at parties. You find yourself drifting to the edges of rooms. You find yourself saying something a little too honest at a moment when everyone expected something comfortable, and watching the subtle recalibration in people's expressions, that slight, almost imperceptible pulling back. The result is that you form fewer connections, but the ones you do form tend to have an unusual quality of realness. The people who can handle your honesty, who actually appreciate rather than recoil from it, tend to be remarkable people. The filtering is painful, but the filtered result is something genuinely rare. You need solitude the way others need company. Here is something that confuses people who do not share this trait, and sometimes confuses even the people who do. You are not lonely in your solitude. Or rather, you are sometimes lonely, but the solitude itself is not the cause. You can feel lonely in a room full of people. You can feel completely at peace and even deeply content when you are entirely alone. These two facts together constitute something that the socially conventional world does not quite have a category for. Most people experience solitude as a deficit state, a temporary absence of the company they need to feel whole. For you, solitude is often a restorative state. It is where you process, where you think, where you return to yourself after the inevitable mild disorientation of social interaction. You need it the way you need sleep, not as a luxury, but as a biological and psychological necessity. When you go too long without it, something in you becomes ragged and irritable and faintly desperate. You start making social mistakes. You start saying things you don't mean. You lose the thread of your own inner life. This means that you will naturally spend more time alone than most people, not because you have failed to attract company, but because you are choosing, on some level, to prioritize the quality of your inner experience over the quantity of your social interactions. The world reads this as aloofness, as arrogance, sometimes, as difficulty. What it actually is a profound respect for your own inner life, and a refusal to dilute it with contact that doesn't nourish it. You are intensely selective about who you trust. There are people in the world who make friends the way some people collect objects, quickly, enthusiastically, with relatively little discrimination. They meet someone at a party and declare them a best friend by the end of the evening. They add people to their inner circle with a generosity that feels, to you, almost reckless. How do they do it? How do they open themselves so readily to people they barely know? How are they not afraid? You are afraid, not in a paralyzing way, not necessarily, but in a way that shapes every new social encounter. You have been hurt by misplaced trust. You have opened yourself to people who were not ready or willing to receive what you offered, and the experience left a mark. You have shared something real and watched it be mishandled, used as gossip, met with incomprehension, turned against you in a moment of carelessness. And now you move carefully. This carefulness is not a flaw. It is a form of self-respect. It reflects an understanding that genuine intimacy, the kind where you can be fully yourself without fear of judgment or betrayal, is not something that can be manufactured quickly. It requires time. It requires demonstrated trustworthiness. It requires the slow accumulation of evidence that this person is safe to be real around. You are not unwilling to trust. You are unwilling to trust cheaply. And in a world that frequently confuses volume with depth, this makes you look closed off, when in reality you are simply waiting for something worth opening for. You feel things at an unusual depth and intensity. One of the least discussed but most significant traits of people with few close friendships is this: they tend to feel things at a depth and intensity that can make ordinary social interaction feel almost dangerously exposing. Not everyone experiences emotion this way. For many people, feelings are relatively manageable. They arise, they are processed, they pass. The emotional weather is variable but not particularly extreme. For you, the weather can be extreme. Joy can be almost overwhelming. Grief can be genuinely devastating. Beauty, a piece of music, a line of poetry, a particular quality of evening light, can stop you in your tracks and fill you with something so large it almost hurts. And other people's pain lands in you heavily, sometimes more heavily than your own. You carry things that other people set down and forget. You remember things that other people never noticed. This depth of feeling is not a dysfunction. It is, in many ways, the source of whatever is most alive and most valuable in you. But it creates a social challenge. Because not everyone can be in the presence of this much feeling without becoming uncomfortable. Not everyone knows what to do when you respond to something with genuine, unfiltered emotion rather than the socially calibrated response that the situation seems to call for. You make people feel things they weren't planning to feel, and some people find that threatening. The friends who can stay, who can sit with you in the full intensity of your inner weather without flinching, are rare. They are worth everything, but they take time to find. Your standards for meaningful connection are genuinely high. This trait is the one most likely to be misread as arrogance, so it requires careful framing. Having high standards for connection does not mean believing you are better than other people. It means having a clear and honest sense of what nourishes you and what doesn't, and being unwilling to pretend otherwise for the sake of not appearing difficult. You know the difference between a conversation that leaves you feeling genuinely alive and one that leaves you feeling vaguely diminished. You know the difference between a friendship where you can be fully yourself and one where you have to edit and manage yourself constantly. You know what it feels like to be truly seen by another person, and once you know that feeling, the simulacrum of it becomes very hard to settle for. This is not a common position. Most people, most of the time, are willing to accept a reasonable approximation of connection, something that meets the basic social need for company and belonging, even if it doesn't reach the deeper registers. And there is nothing wrong with that. But you cannot seem to do it. You try, sometimes. You show up to the gatherings, you make the small talk, you perform the rituals of casual friendship. And then you go home feeling oddly hollowed out, as though you have been fed something that looked like food but contained no nourishment. The result of having standards this high is that you will sometimes, often, go without. You will have periods of acute loneliness. But you will also have, when the right people appear, the experience of a quality of friendship that most people never encounter. The kind that changes you. The kind you carry for the rest of your life. You have a relationship with silence that most people find uncomfortable. The seventh trait is perhaps the subtlest, but it is in many ways the most revealing. You are comfortable with silence. Not just tolerant of it, genuinely comfortable with it, in a way that many people around you are not and cannot quite understand. When there is a lull in conversation, most people feel an immediate, anxious need to fill it. The silence seems to demand something: a joke, an observation, a question, any verbal offering that will smooth over the gap and restore the comfortable flow of words. This anxiety is so universal, and so automatic, that most people are not even aware of it. They simply know that silence feels wrong, and they reach for words the way they might reach for a blanket when they feel cold. You do not have this anxiety. Or at least, you have it much less acutely. You can sit in silence with another person and feel, not discomfort, but a kind of quiet companionship. You can be alone with silence and find it not empty but full, full of thought, full of feeling, full of the subtle texture of your own inner life. You do not need the constant reassurance of sound to feel that you exist and that the moment has value. This quality is deeply attractive to certain kinds of people, the ones who are also comfortable in silence, who are also tired of the compulsive filling of every quiet moment with noise. But it is alienating to others. It reads as coldness, as disengagement, as social ineptitude. At a party, the person comfortable with silence seems to be failing at the basic task of the evening. What they are actually doing is something more interesting. They are waiting for a moment of genuine contact in a space designed for its simulation. When two people who are both comfortable with silence finally find each other, what happens between them is remarkable. The silence becomes a shared language. The things that go unspoken carry as much meaning as the things that are said. And the friendship that grows in that space has a quality of depth and ease that people who have never experienced it might find difficult to believe. The thread that runs through all 7 traits. You may have noticed, reading through these traits, that they are not really separate qualities at all. They are facets of a single underlying orientation, a way of being in the world that prioritizes depth over breadth, authenticity over performance, meaning over comfort. The person who thinks too deeply for small talk is the same person who cannot tolerate inauthenticity, who needs solitude to restore themselves, who feels things at unusual intensity, who is selective about trust, who holds high standards for connection, and who is comfortable in silence. These are not 7 different people. They are one person, seen from 7 different angles. And this person, you, perhaps, exists in a kind of productive tension with a world that is organized, socially, around very different values. The world rewards breadth. It rewards the ability to be charming to strangers, to move easily through crowds, to accumulate social connections the way one might accumulate anything else of apparent value. It reads popularity as a sign of health and solitude as a sign of failure. And if you have absorbed this message, if you have spent years quietly believing that your difficulty in forming large, easy social circles reflects some deficiency in you, then I want to say clearly and directly, it does not. It reflects a difference, a significant one, and like most significant differences, it carries both a cost and a gift. The cost and the gift. The cost is real, and it deserves to be named without minimization. Loneliness is not a small thing. The absence of easy belonging, of the casual, comfortable company that most people take for granted, is a genuine form of suffering. There will be evenings when the silence in your home feels less like peace and more like absence. There will be moments when you watch other people laughing together with an ease that seems impossibly remote from your own experience, and you will feel the ache of that distance keenly. There will be times when you wonder if the depth and authenticity you prize so highly are really worth the price of this particular aloneness. These feelings are valid. They do not need to be argued away or reframed into positivity. They are simply part of the reality of being the kind of person you are, living in the kind of world we live in. Acknowledging them honestly is itself a form of the authenticity that defines you. But the gift is also real. The capacity for depth that makes casual connection so difficult is the same capacity that makes genuine connection so profound. The sensitivity that makes you feel lonely in crowds is the same sensitivity that allows you to be moved by beauty in ways that other people miss entirely. The selectivity that makes friendship hard to form is the same selectivity that makes the friendships you do form into something extraordinary, relationships of rare honesty, rare understanding, rare mutual recognition. The gift and the cost are not separate things. They are the same thing, seen in different lights. What to do with this? A quiet way forward. Knowing all of this does not make the loneliness disappear. But it can change your relationship to it. Instead of experiencing your solitude as evidence of failure, you can begin to experience it as the natural consequence of being a particular kind of person. A person whose social needs are simply different from the average, neither better nor worse, but genuinely distinct. This shift in framing is not a small thing. It is the difference between suffering your aloneness and inhabiting it, between experiencing solitude as a wound and experiencing it as a room you have chosen to live in while you wait for company worthy of the space. The practical implication is this: stop trying to fix yourself into someone who finds easy, shallow connection satisfying. It will not work. It has never worked. Instead, direct your energy toward finding the rare individuals who share your orientation, who also think too deeply, feel too intensely, need too much silence, and hold their trust too carefully to give it away freely. They exist. They are out there, sitting at the edges of their own gatherings, feeling their own version of this particular solitude, wondering if anyone will ever really see them. When you find each other, and you will, what passes between you will not resemble the friendships that most people describe when they talk about social success. It will be quieter, slower, stranger, and far more real. It will be the kind of connection that does not require constant maintenance because it is rooted in something genuine. It will be the kind that survives long silences and difficult honesty and the full weight of two people actually seeing each other. It will be, in the truest sense, what friendship is for. A final word: the world has a way of making people who are different feel wrong. It is efficient at this. It has had a long time to practice. And the particular difference we have been exploring in this video is one of the most quietly painful, because it touches on belonging, which is one of the most fundamental human needs. To feel like you are failing at connection, failing at the very thing that human beings are built for, is a special kind of suffering. But you are not failing. You are operating by a different set of requirements, in a world that did not design its social structures with you in mind. You are looking for something real in spaces built for simulation. You are bringing depth to conversations calibrated for surfaces. Of course it is hard. Of course it is lonely, sometimes. Of course you do not fit. The question is not how to fit. The question is how to find the others who don't fit either, and build, in the spaces between you, something that actually holds. Something honest. Something quiet and deep and sustaining. Something that does not require you to be less than you are. That something is possible. It is rare. But then, so are you. If something in this video felt like it was speaking directly to you, if you have carried these traits quietly, wondering if anyone else understood them, then this channel exists for you. Subscribe and become part of a growing community of people who think deeply, feel fully, and refuse to settle for a surface-level life. New content goes up regularly, crafted to give you the perspective and the language for the life you are actually living. Hit that subscribe button. You have already found one place where depth is welcome.